Okay, guys, chapter 6. We're almost done here. Now, just so you know, I will not be posting a review video for chapter 9 and 10 because we just did those and all the videos for them are still up if you want to go back and review those. Um, so yeah, chapter 6. This one was all about percent. So with lesson 1, we started off by converting between percents and decimals. So the first thing that we're going to do is take a number, and if it is a percent, write it as a decimal. So, for example, I have 74%, right? 74%, like all percents, are out of 100, right? 100% is your whole. So this is 74% of your whole. So if you want to figure out what that is as a decimal, you can go ahead and divide by 100. Now, when you divide a number by 100, that's the same thing as moving the decimal place 2 places. So your answer would be 0.74 as a decimal. All right? So again, if I had 2%, that would be 1, 2, 0.02. If I had 221%, that would be 2.21. All right? So that is how I would go from a percent to a decimal. If I wanted to go the opposite way, let's say I had 0.17, sorry, and I wanted to make this a percent, then I multiply by 100. Now, when you multiply 100 by 100, that's the same thing as moving 2 places to the right. So when you do this, don't get confused by which direction you move. So this is going to end up being 17%. So making it a percent, you multiply, move to the right. Making it a decimal, you divide, move to the left. Now, what if we want to throw fractions in there? This is also from lesson 1. Let's say that I have 3/8. And I want to figure out what is that as a decimal and what is it as a percent. Before you go from a fraction to a percent, you have to go to a decimal first. So I'm going to divide that to figure out what that is. Okay. Goes into 3 0 times. Goes into 33 times. So you can give us 24. Then we'll end up with 6. Goes into 6 7 times. We end up with 56. Goes into 45 times. There we go. So this is our decimal. Now it wants us to make it a percent. So we're going to move 2 places to the right. 37.5%. There you go. So that's what we did in lesson 1. Lesson 2 was using the percent proportion. Now remember we had 2 different ways for figuring out the percent proportion and percent equation. On the final, you will be allowed, just like when we did the test, to use whichever one works best for you to find the missing percent of a number or the missing part or the missing whole. I'm going to remind you what both look like, but again, you can use which one you want. So we're going to start with the percent proportion. So if I wanted to know what percent of 60 is 18. So Remember with the proportion, you're always going to have 100, and you're always going to have your percent out of 100 because percents are out of 100. You're going to have your is over your of if you're going to do the proportion. All right, so we're looking for the percent. What percent? So that's going to be our variable. Our is 18. Our of is 60. There you go. Now, since this is a proportion, like what we were doing yesterday, then that means that these guys multiplied together equal these guys multiplied together. So 60x is going to be the same as 1,800. All right. So now we have to go ahead and solve for x. Divide by 60. X would equal 30. All right. That's an example of a percent proportion. I'll do another one for you. Let's say we have 40 is what percent of 32? So what percent, that's still our variable, 40 is, and 32. All right, so now we're still solving for that percent. 32x, 4,000. X is going to equal 125. All right, so just remember your is over your of and your percent over your 100 if you're doing the percent equation. Now I'm going to take you to 6.3 and remind you how to do the percent equation. All right, so percent equation is, you're going to have is equals percent as a decimal times your of. Okay, so now what number is 24% of 25? Okay, so when doing this one, we're looking for what number is. We're looking for our is. So that's our variable. 24% as a decimal is 0.24. And multiply that by our of, which is 25. All right. You would end up with 6. I'm going to do another one for you. Let's say 9 is what percent of 20? No. 9 is what percent of 20? 9 is what percent? What is our percent? So that's our variable times our of. All right. We want to get rid of that 20 on this side. Right? And so this is going to end up being 0.45. And you need to convert it to a percent because it said what percent. So it's going to end up being, I don't know why I did that. It's going to end up being 45%. There you go. Now, I'm going to do one more, but this one I'm going to show you how to do it with the equation and with the proportion, just to remind you that you should get the same answer. So 83% of 20 is what number? So I'm going to start with my proportion. So percent always goes over 100, right? And then my of is 20, and my is what number? So that's my variable, right? So go ahead, multiply those guys together. You end up with 1,660 times 100x. Go ahead and divide both sides by 100. You end up with 16.6 is what x equals. Okay, so now we're going to do the percent equation. Is what number? So that's what we're looking for. That's our variable. Our percent as a decimal times our of. So if you were to do that, you would also get 16.6. So either way, and on the final, either way, but make sure you're showing your work, you can do to get the answer, whichever is just more comfortable with you. So now we're going to go on to percent increase and decrease. Okay. So with percent increase and decrease, you'll have this in your notes. But remember, there are two different equations that we use here. For percent increase, that means that you went up. And like I said before, I always remember these equations by it's the bigger number minus the smaller number. And so if I went up, I increased. That means that the new number would be bigger minus the old or original. And it's always over the original. For percent decrease, that means you have less. So that means the original number was larger. And it's always over the old number. So let's go ahead and do one of these. Let's say that I have 6 yards to 36 yards. And you have to identify if you increased or decreased. So from 6 to 36, we know that is an increase. And now we're going to calculate what percent did it increase by. Did it double? Did it increase by 100%? Did it quadruple? Either way, let's find out. So increase, so we're going to take our new number minus our original number and put that over our original number, which was 6. All right? So we end up with 30 over 6, which gives us a total of 5. But again, we need to write these as percent. So at the end, we need to multiply by 100 or move it 2 places. That's not the place. It's moving from here 2 places. So it would actually end up being 500%. All right, I'll do another one of those. Let's say we went from 120 to 52. That is a decrease. So we're going to take our original number this time. And then it's always over your original number, remember? So go ahead and subtract. You'd end up with 68 over 120, which is going to leave you with about 56.6 repeating. And then you need to write it as a percent. So again, move your decimal place, 2 places. 1, 2. Now, with the next section here, remember we didn't do section 6, and we're not going to do section 6 on the final as well. All right, but the next section, 6.5, is markups and discounts. This was the one that tripped people up a little bit, so make sure that you really pay attention to this one. So, I'm looking for the problem that I'm doing here. We're going to start with if we want to find the original or the sale price. So either it was marked up or marked down. Either way, we're trying to find the sale price or we're trying to find the original price. So let's say that I had an original price of $50. Let's say there's a discount. Discount means that it's a sale, right? That's what you're getting off for 15%. And I'm looking for the sale price. So what I would need to do is figure out what is 15% of $50 and then subtract that from the $50 and find my sale price that way. So I'm going to do the percent equation because that's just how I like to do it. I'm looking for a number that is 15% of 50, right? So I'm going to go ahead, multiply those. I end up with 7.5. Oh, 7.5. I'm not done. That is 15% of 50. I need to subtract that to figure out what is my sale price if that's how much I get off. So $50 minus 7.5 will give you around $42.50. I'm going to make sure to add that 0 at the end because it's money, so it has to be out of 100 cents. That is how you would do if you were looking for the sale price. Now let's see if you were looking for the original price. So this time my original price is what I'm looking for. I have a discount of 20%, so that's what I got off. And my sale price is $75. Sorry guys, the audio just glitched out there for a second. So you need to figure out, you took 20% off and you're left with $75. So you need to figure out first what percent of your original was 75, and then you find that number. So before we were adding or subtracting at the end, finding the sale price, now we need to do that at the beginning to figure out what percent of the original number is 75. So if you took 20% off, that means that this $75 is 80% of that original number. So let's go ahead and figure out 75 is 80% of what number? Go ahead and divide both sides by 0.80. You would end up with 93.75. That would be your answer. So when you're trying to find the sale price, you're going to figure out the percent of the original and then subtract that. When you're trying to find the original price, look at, okay, this is the percent they took off. So what percent am I left with? And find the percent of what number. Last one we're going to do is a markup, and we'll be done with chapter 6. So let's say now that I had a store, because remember, markups are when the store buys it for one price and then marks it up so that they can sell it to you for more and actually make some money. So let's say that the store pays $50 for a pair of shoes. All right? And then there's a markup of 25%. I want to know, what's the selling price? How much do I have to buy them for if they marked them up by 25%? So what I'm going to do is figure out what is 25% of that 50. Then once I figure out what 25% of 50 is, then all I have to do is add that to the 50. So remember, when we're doing sales, like discounts, we're going to subtract that percent. But when we're doing markups, we're going to add that percent. So I want to figure out what number is 25% of 50. We would end up with 12.5. I'm not done. I need to add that to my 50 to figure out what is my selling price now. And they're selling it to us for $62.50, remembering to add my 0 on the back of there. So that is chapter 6.